Hello everybody, this is your host, Odd Job Entertainment, bringing you another video. In the industry, this would typically be referred to as a cold open, meaning that this is not scripted, but this is actually a new thing. This is a lukewarm open. The reason why is a cold open is when you go off script and you just kind of wing it for an intro. That's kind of what this is, except that I already recorded this and then realized that autofocus was off and I was not in focus for any of what I had recorded. The whole reason why we're doing this, though, is I had set up a script that I was going to record for a more edited video, and I was sitting down to record my voiceover for that video when I saw this thumbnail from Salty Mike. It shows an inventory screen, has the caption about time, and if you follow myself or Salty Mike, and if you're a real Chad, you follow us both, you'll know that we agree on a lot of aspects about how CIG currently operates with cosmetics and physicalized items. So seeing that, man, it really threw a wrench into my plans for this video. I have watched what CIG has planned for cosmetics and physicalized items in the future, and I think that they're going in a really good direction with it. With that said, I do still want to record this script largely unchanged because I think that it still builds on what CIG has planned, and I think that it'll just add some flavor as we get closer to seeing these things implemented in the game, and I hope that you guys can see that too. So with that said, let's get into the show. I'm a 90s baby, and one of the best racing games from my childhood was Need for Speed Underground 2. As a very vanilla boy from Utah, something about that loading screen was exciting, like a GTA Lite, if you will. And Need for Speed Underground 2 pulled off something that a lot of racing games attempt to do, but ultimately fail, and that was its implementation of an open world. Part of this was finding and discovering new shops across different categories that would unlock parts and services to upgrade your cars. And as far as style goes, Underground 2 was the epitome of 90s and early 2000s cool, with loud graffiti designs, neon in every crevice, hydraulic lifts, and NOS purges. Finding these shops, though, was like a scavenger hunt. The only info you were given by the game was that there was a shop type to be found in the new area of the map you had unlocked. Each shop type had a color-coordinated light that corresponded with its entrance, and with just those limited clues, you set off to find it. And finding it meant that you got the next tier of upgrades and a new place to apply them. Now, CIG, Star Citizen, does weird things with paint. On one hand, it makes players go through painstaking measures to experience a diegetic and immersive experience. So a ship paint is a physical item that takes up inventory space at your home location. I think my dad would be thrilled with this. My parents still have the buckets of leftover paint from when their house was first built, just in case he ever gets the hankering to repair all the damage that having 5 kids tends to bring. And just like in Star Citizen, those buckets take up space and prevent you from doing anything else with that space. But on the other hand, that paint is just a bucket that somehow gets applied and creates a pattern on your ship. So at the same time, you have an inconvenience in the form of lost inventory space, and I suppose a benefit of advanced paint that apparently has a genome that directs the molecules of paint to lay down in specific patterns. My point being, we can toss out the realism argument. Realism only works in games anyways, in so much as it's fun. And the way CIG does paint today, it's not fun. It's needlessly inconvenient, and as we'll talk today, tends to hurt the experience. If we do want to talk realism for a moment, how many of you guys have an automotive paint booth set up in your house? I didn't think so. I might get a couple comments from the rare people that do, but it should be plainly obvious that most of us don't have that. Instead, if I want to give my beater a facelift, I'd need to take it to a professional. In addition, I'd expect them to provide the paint and supplies. I'm not going to be toting a big bucket of paint for my car to the paint shop. That would be weird. That's what I'm paying them for. And if you've ever seen those sponsorship placements where people will drive around with logos on their car and get paid for it, the sponsor pays for the paint treatment in those cases, but the paint shop still provides all the supplies. That is to say that if CIG wanted to take an actually realistic twist on ship paints, the player would take it to the professional, select the job they want done to the ship, and the paint would get applied. There'd be no storage of paint necessary, and CIG would simply have the skin as a selectable treatment in a terminal. Paid skins are unlocked in the pledge store and then applied as a zero-cost treatment in-game at the ship paint shop. And this wouldn't be a major shift from how it's done today either, but it comes with a few benefits. First, even if the paint is a zero mass item, it currently is something you have to scroll past in your home inventory, and that's just annoying. Having this just be a card that pops up when using the correct paint terminal means you don't have to think about it ever except for when you actually want to apply it. Second, having it be a separate terminal or Mobiglass app or location opens up ways that CIG can offer new experiences. What if you had to find these paint shops just like in Underground 2? What if you had to find these in the verse, and finding them gives access to new colors or treatments? Once found, then you gain access to a quantum marker for them, but not before then. Well, heck, that makes finding skins into a bit of, dare I say, exploration. Also, other players that have already found them then have an opportunity to transport newer players to these locations as part of a trade deal. And third, this is actually a more realistic scenario than what we have currently. Now, again, I only argue for realism in games where it can enhance the experience. Too often, people get hung up on realism when it can actually make your experience worse. And we're also talking about realism in a game that's set 900 years in the future where you fly spaceships and not drones. But I think this is a case where the added realism would actually take away from the annoyance of the current system and offer an actual gameplay experience opportunity. Fourth, it decouples a cosmetic item from being a physical item. This has benefits in Star Citizen that far exceed just ship skins. FPS weapons and armor have a much worse implementation currently, where the item is forever bound to the original color it was found or purchased with. This means that you can never actually change it, and it also has made it so that CIG is selling physical items that affect gameplay on the Power Store that you can never lose. Thinking ahead to 1.0, a game like Star Citizen would very likely have new players do an array of missions on foot, where they'd be working through the armor and weapon tiers as they gain an understanding of the game mechanics and weapon variety. It might be a couple hours into your gameplay before you actually set foot in a spaceship. This would be extremely typical of an onboarding experience that players expect of new games. Selling the weapon and armor itself basically gives the keys to Dad's Ferrari to the player and completely undercuts the learning experience and sense of progression, especially in the early game context. This is a problem that CIG needs to fix in so many other ways as well, but we'll talk about that in another video. Decoupling the cosmetic from the physical item means that CIG can actually really cut loose with selling all kinds of cosmetics, and in quantities that would embarrass the store of today. So long as they're linked, I imagine that limits CIG to only selling so many for the same problems we've already discussed. But if a skin is just a skin, as it should always have been, that's way too rhymey, then there's no downside to having 5, 10, or 50 times the number we have today. It would also mean that if you don't find that gaudy metallic red attractive, then you could just recolor an item found in the verse. The true end game of any MMO is always fashion, so why force players to use a weapon skin that clashes with their drip? Zoolander would not be pleased. What then are the steps towards making this vision of cosmetics a reality? Well, first step is to make the paint items no longer visible in the inventory at all. They only need to be thought about when using them, and that's currently done with the Mobiglass Ship Customization app. This would already alleviate much of the present headache while giving CIG time to work out the rest. Second step would be making these cosmetic items something that is bound to the player, but not to their inventory. This makes it so that you don't have to fly to a singular location to make any changes to your ship's look. Third, take these changes and expand them to weapons and armor. This fixes a lot of the issues with economy balance by making it so that selling cosmetics on the power store doesn't bork your player's trade value. And fourth is refitting this into a nicer delivery through either an app, vendor, or location spread throughout the verse. I'm partial to having paint shops set up everywhere. It makes sense to have them at every landing zone, but also spread across planetary surfaces, some space stations, and even floating shipyards out in space. I think drip customization for weapons and armor should just be done through an app, but for spaceships, I love the possibilities of having locations like this spread all over the verse. An additional way to make this into an experience would be to have paint job vouchers as a lootable item that gets turned in at these locations to unlock cosmetics. This gives another dial that CIG can use to craft experiences that reward players. But what do you think? If CIG did implement these changes as I've described, paint a picture of how you'd see it playing out in the game as a player, and what tweaks would you make to this framework? Now, I'm making this video just after CIG released their Star Citizen Live Q&A Earning in the Verse, and it actually does touch on a lot of changes that they are planning on for inventory, cosmetics, and physical items. I think that they're going in a good direction, and I like what I see so far. It goes perfectly in line with what I would like to see for cosmetics and physical items being split, and I think that this script should hopefully just add some context in how that may be applied in the verse. You know, what kinds of gameplay experiences can you expect from something like this? And I don't think that implementing something like the Need for Speed Underground 2 discovery system where you find new paint shops and such would be at all out of line with what they're already talking about. But let me know what you think down below. If you have any comments, I'd love to read them. But until next time, this is Odd Job Entertainment, signing off.